All right, thanks, Franco. All right, well, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and just dive right into introduction so that you can meet our awesome panel and we can get our discussion underway. So this is a discussion about interning and or moving to Washington, DC and the surrounding areas in Maryland and Virginia. This is what I hope to be the first of many similar panels we can do with other major metro areas in the country. So we hope to provide this as an ongoing resource. I picked the DC area because I'm a little biased. I actually lived there for 4 years myself after college before moving back down here to work for the Therri Foundation. So I'm just going to call out a panelist and get you to introduce yourself with your school, your Therri year, what you're doing now, and then what your personal history of living and working in the area has been. And then we'll just get you to popcorn around the panel till everyone has introduced themselves. So I'm going to start with Kaitlyn.
Hi everyone, I'm Kaitlyn Block. I went to the University of Texas at Dallas where I studied healthcare studies and minored in political science. I'm currently an administrative fellow at UTMD Anderson Cancer Center after completing my MPH last year. I'm currently in our cancer prevention and control platform. My history with DC is in undergrad, I was an Archer Fellow, and so I was only there for the spring of 2017 semester, but as you all know, that was a quite eventful semester to be in DC, a few months, and I interned at the Office of National Drug Control Policy.
And why don't we go to Broderick next?
Hey everyone, I'm Broderick Johnson, also University of Texas at Dallas. My year is 2016. I had a major in mathematics, minor in political science, and right now I'm about to start my first year at Yale Law School. Also an Archer Fellow when I was in DC. It was for the fall 2018 semester. And as far as I can say about my internship is that it was with the federal judiciary, the federal courts.
Great, thank you. And then why don't we jump over to Stoney, and then I'll have you guys just call each other out after this. I'm gonna start assigning people to the breakout rooms while y'all are talking.
Thanks, Amber. My name is Stoney Burke. I was a 1999 Therri Scholar. Class of 2003 at Texas A&M University. Been in Washington for 16 years now. So I grew up in West Texas in a small town of Roscoe, school in College Station, and then directly to DC after that. So I'll spare the 16 years of career here, but I've been in and around in politics, public policy, and currently lead congressional affairs for Amazon Web Services.
Hey, Stoney, you got to choose someone.
What's that? Kim. Sorry.
Cheating. I'm Kim Grossett, and I'm a 2014 Therri transfer at UTSA in San Antonio. I was a teacher in San Antonio for 2 years before I moved here last June. So I've been living here for a full year, and I'm working for a nonprofit in education equity. And who hasn't gone yet? Therri.
Hi, my name is Therri Usher. I am a UTD 2007 Therri Scholar. I graduated from UT Dallas in 2011 with a bachelor's in mathematics and a concentration in statistics. After that, I moved to Baltimore, Maryland to attend Johns Hopkins University. I completed my PhD there in 2016, so I lived in Baltimore for 5 years. I currently work as a statistician at the Food and Drug Administration. I work in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. I support the drug development and regulation of drugs to treat rare diseases, particularly inborn errors and medical genetics. I currently live in Columbia, Maryland, which is about halfway between Baltimore and DC. And under normal circumstances, I work in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of DC. And I'll pick Shruti.
Hi everyone, so I'm Shruti. I'm a UTSA 2015 scholar. I majored in biology. My history with DC is I got selected as an Archer Fellow and moved in spring 2019. And I interned with the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, which turned into a job offer. So I worked there for a while. I got a provincial med school admission, so I moved to Florida for that. But then I decided that I wanted to do public health, so now I'm starting my master's in public health at Johns Hopkins. That was all the questions, I think, right? Oh, I picked Colin.
Hey there, guys. I am Colin McLaren here. I'm a 2017 traditional scholar at Texas Tech, so I'm actually still finishing up my degree. But currently, I'm interning for a Nashville-based political consulting firm. And then I also work on the side when COVID isn't a thing as a advanced contractor and a political event contractor. So I work campaigns. So I just finished up working for Bloomberg's campaign here the past couple months. And I was planning to jump to Biden, but then COVID happened and that changed the way campaigns kind of go. I've spent 2 summers up there, one kind of living on my own and then another going through Texas Tech's internship program where they place you in Congress and we live in a house together. And then I travel pretty regularly up there for events and different contracts. And has anybody?
No, I think that was everybody, right? All right, perfect. Well, panel, thank you all so much for your time this evening. I'm really excited for people to have the chance to ask you questions. Before we sort of break out into the 2 camps of people interested in internships and people interested in talking about sort of making the move and living up in the area, we have some general discussion that I'd like to do while we have all of you together. And the first thing that I'd love to do is kind of just have a clarifying conversation about the area we're discussing. You hear it referred to as the DMV or just like the DC area, or, you know, it's a huge metro area, and there's a lot of different viewpoints because a lot of people on this panel have either been in DC proper or a little bit outside of it. So I'd love to hear the perspective about just how we define the area in general. And the 2 of you, I think, that have been there the longest, Stoney and Therri, I'd love to hear from y'all. Just when we talk about this area, and it's the DC metro area, what really does that entail?
Here, you want to go first, or?
Stoney, I'll let you answer first.
You know, I've had the unique privilege. I've always lived in DC, in and around Capitol Hill. I, started out, with the traditional intern house, which most of you are going to be interested in, on Capitol Hill around Lincoln Park, where, 4 guys. At that time it was the Bush administration. So, roommates working in the Bush administration. I was working on Capitol Hill and had that awesome experience. And those are still lifelong friends to this day. Most of them moved back to Texas. And stayed in that house for a long time. And then I live around the H Street area now, which is right below Gallaudet University and Union Market. And so I've always enjoyed living in the city. But I think the city has a lot of great things to offer, whether you're going, by bike or scooter or metro or, have a car. But that's also the great thing about, I feel like living in DC, you can get the best of living in the city, but then the excursions outside of the city are so easy to get to. You have Shenandoah Valley, which is one of just a treasure of a national park, a couple hours away. You've got a 5-hour or less, actually, train ride to New York. And so there's a lot of great excursions you can take from DC. And of course, you can head a little further south to North Carolina and others for road trips. But I've always enjoyed living in the city, but I've always worked in and around this area. But encourage you, if you're here for just a short period of time, to experience DC. Now, when you start factoring in, if you're buying something or having a family, then other considerations, of course, come into play, and that kind of broadens a lot of people outside of the city in their careers. I had, a lot of friends that have moved to Northern Virginia or Maryland in that aspect. I do have a 2-year-old and 4-year-old, and we still raise them here and love every bit of it. Although during a pandemic, whenever, you know, we have a real severe lack of green space and access to green space. So that can be challenging. I didn't notice it as much until, you know, we're in a lockdown mode and can't just quickly walk around the corner, you know, or go down the street to the Arboretum, which is a beautiful national park as well. It's not technically a park, but nationally administrated park. So that's a little bit about my background and living in the city, and plug for living here.
So as someone who loves DC but has never actually lived in DC proper, I have to be careful about when I use the term DMV. So DMV, for those who are unaware, stands for DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And so I find that when I'm talking to Texans, I'll say DMV actually referring to DC, Maryland, and Virginia. But if you ask people who are from the area, they will identify the DMV as DC and its adjoining counties in Maryland and Virginia. So that would be, for instance, DC, Prince George's County, Maryland, maybe Montgomery County, Maryland, and then the counties on the Virginia side that hold like Arlington and Alexandria. So it's very distinct for them. I've met people who are adamant that Baltimore is not a part of the DMV. So I think you just have to know who your audience is in terms of when you're using that term. When I go home and, you know, have to speak to like my parents' friends or something like that, I tell them I live in the DMV just so that they can get some sort of general perspective. However, when I'm talking to people in the area, I oftentimes just say exactly where I live, or I will give the county that I live in, which is Howard County. So I just think it depends on what the audience is.
Sure, great. I know that was one of the things we talked about in our planning meeting was trying to help people differentiate between, are we only talking about the area, you know, right around the Capitol? Are we talking about the surrounding counties, or are we talking all the way up to Baltimore? And as Stoney mentioned, it's so easy to get in between all of these areas too. So for those of you that are thinking about housing or even trying to figure out how to get around within the area, you really have a lot to work with. So I wanted to shift gears to my next question, which is, I think, a big one for a lot of people who have not gone to internships or worked outside of Texas before, but maybe they have and just have not gone to this area in particular. Can I get a few of you to comment on any potential, I would say, like culture shock things that you experienced when you came from Texas? Like, what were some things that were you just had to make big adjustments for, either when you first moved up there, or for those of you that interned, like what were some big, just in general, adjustments that you had to make? That was some pretty common questions we received when people registered for the panel as well. And to start with the interns, why don't you want to start us off, Kaitlyn?
Sure. I guess on a lighter note, you know, you have to really be mindful when you grocery shop. For me, that was a huge one, was, you know, you're not driving to the grocery store, especially if you're there as an intern. You might have a car if you live in, you know, these adjacent areas to DC, but for the most part, where we lived for Archer was up the street on H Street, actually, probably near where Stoney lives, to a Walmart. And so when we first got there, because we were limited in what we could bring, we didn't have bedding. And so we walked to the Walmart, but then we were like, well, how are we going to get it back? And so you just have to be like more intentional, I guess, with what you're buying at the store. The grocery stores are smaller. They might have more limited selections. As you all know, I'm a big HEB fan, and there's nothing of that equivalent up there, at least in my experience. I did live in New Haven, and we had the equivalent to the grocery store Giant in DC. So ours was called Stop and Shop, but Giant is a better name, I think. And so on a more serious note, though, I think being mindful of your surroundings. I think in Texas, you know, there's a lot more space, and you're not as, people aren't as hurried as they might be up north in the mid-Atlantic areas. And so just being like very cautious and mindful of your surroundings, and kind of knowing where you're going before you get out there and start looking on your Google Maps, because that will immediately either say you're a tourist, you don't know where you're going, and I feel like that can leave you sometimes in a vulnerable position. So those are my two main takeaways, one lighter and one more serious.
Anybody else want to add to that? Yeah, Broderick?
Sure. I guess being on, I guess, the grounds of not having a car, I'm definitely a big car person, and I love driving and open roads and stuff like that. Having to walk to work or walk to the train station and take that somewhere, being mindful of the weather. You know, in Texas, we get heat that DC is never going to get, but we're not in it in the same way. We're in our car. We're going to be in the heat from the walk, so from the door to the car and from the car to wherever we're going. But walking to work, just the 15 minutes I took walking into work, I'd show up sweating, and I'd have to go and, like, you know, the next 30 minutes is me, you know, trying to stop sweating. And then when it got colder, it was me, you know, stop shivering. So I think being mindful of being out in the elements more while going from place to place is a big thing.
So one thing I would add to that would be, especially for like ladies, I know that I think all the Archer Fellows, we live in Station House now, they moved us, and it's roughly about like 30 to 35 minutes walk to the Capitol. And so the one advice that I would give is, like, bring a comfortable pair of shoes. Like, they don't have to look nice. It can be hideous. Wear them when you walk, and then when you go to work, you can go in the restroom or something and like change. That's what a lot of people do. And I also recommend, like, if you get sweaty a lot, then you can just like take an extra pair of clothes and then go change there. I've seen a lot of people do that. That would be my biggest thing, because no one told me that, and I wore heels and I tried to walk 35 minutes. That did not go well. So
Also, I guess what I would add to that too, especially on like the walking, is if you're coming anywhere around Capitol Hill, use the tunnels. The tunnels are air conditioned. The tunnels are far more comfortable in general than walking outside. If you're coming from the north side, like H Street, go into the Senate buildings, go under the Capitol, and go to your office. It's so much better. I think also the cost of things is something that throws a lot of people off. A lot of us are coming from college towns where we can get, you know, $2 Jack and Coke, but you go up there, that's not an option. Your groceries are way more expensive. Food is way more expensive. And I think that's a major surprise to people. And then I guess that kind of pivots into my second thing, which is do not bring a car. You don't need one, especially if you're living on Capitol Hill. I had a car for about a month because of one of my contracting gigs, and it's the worst thing to drive. It was a Toyota Tundra, driving it around downtown DC. It's a nightmare. Finding parking's horrific, and parking spots are like $300 or $400. So, and there's only 2 gas stations in DC. I think there's one in Georgetown and one over in Eastern Market, and it just gouges you on gas prices. So it's not worth it.
jumping off of Colin's point, I would say get the Metro Pass. I didn't have that, and that's like one of my biggest regrets. You save a lot of money if you get that.
So that was actually one of the next questions I was going to ask, if y'all have any general tips for transportation, both with Metro or for commuting, because I know that a couple of y'all do have cars. So if there's an app you can recommend, or as Shruti mentioned, the actual like smart trip card for Metro is a must if you're going to be using the train a lot. But anything else y'all would like to add to that, especially those of you that do have cars?
I think in DC, Via is the way to go. Like, especially if you're Ubering, Via is way cheaper than Uber and Lyft. And if you're looking for a rideshare plan, Via has like passes that you can use in DC that cut down on the cost. I mean, that drastically, for like $200 a month, you can get pretty much unlimited free rides with it. And they like piggyback off taxis. It's a pretty cool plan, but I'm a huge fan of Via as opposed to Uber and Lyft.
Well, I drive to work. Of course, I brought my car with me from Texas since I was moving here permanently. And I have about, if I go at off-peak times, my drive to work is about 13 minutes. If I go in traffic, it's 45. So something that is a culture shock and has to do with driving for me here is how long it takes to get everywhere. It can be 4 miles away, but it takes you an hour. I don't know why. I'm not sitting in traffic. For the most part, I just don't know why. So the whole shutdown because of COVID has been great because I think in Texas, most of us call it a loop. I know Houston has a loop, San Antonio has a loop. Here they call it the Beltway, the belt around the city. And it is usually a standstill, even on Saturday afternoon. And you're like, what? There's no construction, there's no accident. Where are all these people going on Saturday? So it's been great during the shutdown, but now it's starting to pick up. And I did sit on the Beltway a few days ago, coming home from Bethesda. So I work in Bethesda, I live in Silver Spring. So my condo, my balcony is on over the sidewalk of Maryland, and across the street, the sidewalk is DC. I'm right on the border. I'm like at the point of Maryland and DC line. So that's very interesting. The rule, like the parking rules on the street are different. I have a parking garage, thank goodness, but people park on the street on the Maryland side, and there's like a rule there, and then on the other side it's DC, and there's a different rule there. So people, I guess the rule is better for DC because everybody wants to park on that DC curb. I don't know what it is because I park in the garage. I don't park on the street there, so I haven't looked into it. But yeah, the amount of time. And so, for instance, I've only been here a year and I'm making friends, and seems like everyone I meet lives in Virginia. So they're an hour away. And I'm like, wow, this is like me being BFFs with someone in Austin and meeting them for lunch when I lived in San Antonio. And I never would have done that. That would have been a long distance relationship. But here, that's just the way it is. So you're like, hey, be there in an hour and 15. I'll try to beat GPS. But that's just something you have to get used to and plan the timing. I love the metro. It's a 10-minute walk from my condo. So what I usually do when things aren't shut down, I drive to the office during the week, and then my car sits on the weekend, and I never use it because I take the metro. But now it's kind of opposite. Now it's just sitting all week, and then I'm trying to get out and go somewhere, and out of the city is better for social distancing. So I've been going out of the DC area.
Great.
I would also add, even if you don't live in DC, particularly if you're moving here long term, see if your employer will subsidize your transportation costs. So FDA falls under the Department of Health and Human Services, who does subsidize all of our travel. So pre-COVID-19, I utilized the van pool. So me and 5 of my colleagues would rent a van, and basically HHS gave us a government credit card, and we would just charge our fees onto our credit card. So they would basically pay for any transportation that is not you driving your own car by yourself to work. So look and see if your employer can provide some assistance with transportation.
Yeah, and a lot of employers give you, will pay for your Metro card, like your monthly fee or part of it for that Smart Trip card. But if not, like I have a Smart Trip card, I keep a few here for when I have guests, and you just load it up at the station. I keep $50 on it or something. There are plans if you're going to use it every day that you can pay, like $300 a month or something like that, and go unlimited back and forth to work. So, and a lot of employers will subsidize that.
Great. So I have one more general question, and then I think we can go ahead and break the group up so we can really dig into people that are interested in the moving aspect versus internships. But one of the other things that we saw a lot when people registered is, what are some of the must-see and must-do things in the area? Like, what can you guys recommend that people should not miss out on?
I would say I'm going to talk more about kind of taking advantage of an internship. I think you're probably looking for more tourist activities, but one of the things I want to highlight is that you should take advantage while you're here in DC, the networking opportunities. In that, while yes, Texas is the friendliest state, and you come from campuses where you've leveraged a network of professors or other things to get your internship, make sure you take advantage of that while you're here. Definitely take advantage of everything geographically that DC has to offer, but I think you'd be remiss not to take advantage, whether it's through the Therri network or through your LinkedIn network or alumni network or whatever that may be. Of course, we can't do coffees as conveniently during a pandemic, but I think it's probably even easier to access people via Zoom at more senior levels at whatever company or place or part of government you want to work for in the future. don't underestimate what a powerful tool that is for you to leverage during your short period of time here. Because everybody, not everybody, a large part of the population here in the DC metro area moved from somewhere else. And there's a kindred spirit towards others that are, up here for a short period of time or interested in being here for a period of time and sharing that sort of experience. So don't hesitate. It's not a weird thing to, ping somebody on LinkedIn or whatever and ask them to grab coffee or Zoom and talk about, their experience in Washington, whether that's political, business, healthcare, or academia, or whatever that may be. It's a very common thing that can sometimes surprise people because DC seems like a large city, but it's a very network-oriented city. So take advantage of that during your short time.
Take advantage of being from Texas, because in my year-long experience here, everybody just loses their minds when they find out you're from Texas. They're just, oh, you're from Texas, and they just wanted to, they've got a thing for Texans up here, so take advantage of that.
I would also add to take advantage of the fact that you are on the East Coast. Being Texans, we have a different sense of distance and scale, and major cities here are so close to each other. So if you're living in DC, don't be afraid to go to Baltimore. If you're living in Baltimore, don't be afraid to go to DC. Even when I lived in Baltimore, my department would offer retreats in Philadelphia. I'm known for hopping on Amtrak and taking a day trip to New York City. You can even easily take like a weekend trip to Boston. The round trip tickets aren't that expensive. And keep in mind, all of this is pre-COVID, but just take advantage of the fact that you're close to so many metropolitan areas, because this doesn't happen in Texas.
That was something that definitely took me a while to get over. When somebody would mention going to a completely different state, that just did not register for me. It was like, but you're not going 4 hours away minimum. What do you mean? Just trying to recalibrate yourself for that. Well, I would love to be able to put us out in the breakout rooms, but while I have the entire panel together, does anybody in the group have a general question just for the panel to all answer? So the way we're going to split it up while I'm waiting to see if we have questions in the chat is Kaitlyn, Shruti, Broderick, and Colin are going to stay here in this main room with those of you who indicated that you're interested in talking about internships. They have just 3 simple questions we kind of discussed as a panel for them to start off with, but then it's open forum. Whatever y'all would like to ask them, you're more than welcome to. And then the rest of us are going to jump out into a breakout room, and we will talk more about moving away from Texas, moving up to the Mid-Atlantic, to this area, and any moving specific questions that y'all might have. So whenever I split the group up, again, feel free to turn on your webcams, feel free to unmute if you would like to ask questions out loud. You can also still use the chat if you want. You're only going to be able to chat questions to the people that are in the room with you. So those of us who leave, you're not going to be able to ask us a question. But I'm kind of watching things right now, and we don't really have any general questions. I'm going to go ahead and split the room now. So those of you that were in the group that said they were interested in talking about moving, I'm going to jump y'all over into the breakout room. I'm going to hang out in here just for another moment to make sure that the intern panel is situated, and then I'll jump over and join you as well. So Kim, whenever y'all jump into the other breakout room, go ahead and feel free to start recording y'all's room. Okay? Okay, I'm opening the room. So if you were supposed to go to the breakout, you should get a little prompt that'll tell you that you can jump over. And then for everyone else who said they were interested in an internship, please feel free to turn on your webcam and join our panel who's hanging out in here.
Amber, I can't record the meeting. It says I need permission from you.
That's okay. Franco's recording this.
Okay, you got those.
So we'll be good. Okay, so I'm still waiting for a few more people to jump into the other room. So all right, for everyone else though, again, feel free to turn on your webcam. y'all have the full attention of the panel to ask your questions. Panelists, I did have those 3 breakout questions that we wanted to start with. So before I jump into the other room, Kaitlyn, would you like to just, with the list of questions, kind of start off with what you wish you had known before heading to DC as an intern? And then I will let you guys just kind of take it from there. If y'all need anything, let Franco know and he can help. He can have me jump back in here with you.
All right.
Yeah, so I guess like something I wish I had known was how easy it is to like kind of get in your head. I think Stoney really alluded to earlier. You feel like this pressure to take advantage of all the opportunities that are at your feet. I mean, there really is just an overabundance of networking opportunities. And I think something that's really important before you leave, but also while you're there, is to really determine, like, kind of do some introspection and like, what do you want to get out of this? And you may not know, like, before you leave for your internship. At the time, I thought I like wanted to stay maybe for a job. But it's really after talking to different people from different perspectives and different, I guess, strata within their career to really know what the ideal next move is. So I think to that end, I think it's really important maybe to find a mentor while you're in DC to really help you with that, because it might be easy to say yes to everything, but you don't have all the time in the world. You're going to be probably working or studying for a lot of your work week. And then on the weekends, you know, as everybody said, you can take advantage and like go outside of the city. You can stay within the city and do like all the really touristy things, which I think I would encourage everybody to do while you're there, because I think DC to me is like the most unique city in the world in terms of just like history and different monuments and such like that. But you really have to be mindful of your time there and be intentional. And that's something I was just really excited to go to DC. I'd never been to DC before, and I think I wish I had done a little more introspection. And I think that would have helped me kind of decide who I wanted to reach out to, what were the types of questions that I should be asking people I encounter. Because it was honestly kind of like, I don't know, very spontaneous in terms of who was I going to reach out to. It was kind of one thing led after the other, and I think that's important too, to give yourself some time to allow for that as well. So I think it's just like being sure you have a good balance between both, like the fun things, but networking and then getting like your work done. And don't put your head to the grindstone and just like work, because it is important that you take advantage, especially if you're only there for a short amount of time. So sorry, that was probably a lot more than anybody wanted to hear. Anybody else can go ahead.
What was the prompt again?
What do you wish you had known before interning in DC?
I definitely think it's people go to DC and they have like these I think firstly we have these grand illusions that we're going to go and, you know, change the world in our first summer. And I also think that we have these, you know, like mentalities that we have to go in and, you know, put our nose to the grindstone the entire time and be very intense about our work. And I think what you realize very quickly when you're there for an extended period of time is that these people want to have fun too. They want to develop relationships, and DC is a city built on relationships, and you can't develop those relationships only by creating incredible work product. Like, you have to create incredible work relationships too. And I think like not thinking too much of yourself is huge. Take your intern badge off after you get off work. Don't flash it around. Don't talk about yourself like you're, you know, the big cheese in town. Cause you'll hear interns do this all the time and you just shake your head. You'll hear kids be like, do you know who I work for? Like, don't do that. Like, that's the last thing you need to be doing. It takes away from your experience. It takes away from other people's experience, and just realizing the part you play is a small one, but a very integral one is a huge portion, I think, of enjoying your time there.
Do you want me to read you the second question, or?
Who, me?
Does any?
Or do you have like anything else to add, or? I guess I can go next. The one thing like that really helped me transition into DC was talking to people beforehand who had worked at my internship place and just like people in general and ask them for advice. Like I'll give this one story from my office. Like it's very competitive and all interns want work because everyone wants a job coming out of that internship. So just be mindful that if you have some advice before going in, that would help. So with our office, like we have 3 different desk setups, and the front desk is like, looks like the hotshot desk and everyone was fighting for it. But trust me, you do not want to be on the front desk because all those interns did. It's a very important job, like picking up phones and like welcoming people in, but that wouldn't let you do a lot of things. So like I didn't fight for it while the other interns were, and I was like, I'll take the back one. And that worked out great because I got more projects that were more technical and I got more experience in that sense. So like, don't be discouraged if you don't get like the hotshot things, like things will work out would be my biggest advice. Like talk to people and like get an idea of like how that office works. So if you can find someone who's worked there before, that's like a plus. The biggest adjustment for me moving into DC was that I am kind of a timid person and I would never speak up in like social settings, and that changed a lot while I was in DC. I started talking out more and like try to engage in conversation, don't take over, but like certainly be present and talk a little bit. And then the other thing would be like networking. When you go have coffees, like this I started doing later in the semester, but when you go have coffee with someone, ask them for 2 contacts that they can connect you with, and that helped me a lot. Also keep like a journal or something with all your contacts so you can reach out to them anytime you need. That was like one of the most helpful things. And do be thankful to people who meet you and take the time to like help you out. Like personally, I would send thank you notes or like handwritten thank yous. I think that's like a big thing in DC.
Could anyone who's here who's actually knows they're going to DC, I don't know what, I mean, with COVID, how that's changed programs and stuff, but if y'all have done it, definitely put it in the chat, and I guess later we can definitely open it up for like talks, just so we know, I guess, what to gear some of the stuff we're saying to people who are thinking about it or gonna seek it in the future versus people who are, oh, I know I'm doing this, because I think there's different levels of advice we could be giving. So yeah, definitely feel free to put that in the chat or bring it up later. Want to add on to, I guess, adjustments, if we're talking about that now. One big thing I think is who you're living with and your roommates. I had, for the first time, had a roommate that was in my bedroom, right? At UTD, we have suites. So we all have our, we have a shared common space, but we have our own rooms. Living with somebody was something I, had done, and I had a terrible, terrible roommate who wanted it to be absolutely silent after 11 p.m. And that wasn't going to happen, right? We're all working and trying to do class and trying to have a social life and stuff. And getting on with roommates is a big adjustment, I think, that everyone has to make. And, being introspective and thinking about, how you're going to address conflict in that way is a really important skill and to have. But yeah.
Does anybody else have any other adjustments that you had to make? I think the roommate one is a really key one, especially, I don't know if it was you, Colin, that alluded to earlier regarding the cost of living, but you might be more affordable to live on your own or just with one other person and have more space in Texas. But in DC, in New York City, a lot of these big cities, you will pretty much have a roommate, probably lots of roommates. And then intern programs like Archer, you are we had 7 other roommates, and I was in a room with 3 other people. So that was fun. Someone would watch the tasty cooking videos like on full blast, like on their phone. I didn't even know people watched those videos with sound on. So it's like things like that. Like I think Broderick brought up some excellent points. I don't know if there are any other comments on adjustments, but the last question is, what recommendation would you make for getting the most out of your time there? I know we've kind of touched on that, but please fellow panelists, if you have anything to say.
I think going outside your comfort zone is a huge thing. And I think a lot of times, I think the vast majority of people probably in this chat or kind of approaching this, watching this when it's recorded and posted online later, are going to be looking at congressional internships. And I think there's a huge pressure whenever you're a congressional intern to be, you know, best buddies, to be the member's body man, you know, to be super close to the member, get coffee with the member, that kind of thing. When really the most important people to meet are people like the scheduler, the people like the comms assistant. Those are going to be the people that connect you with their friends in other offices, that can connect you with a whole wider group of people than even the member can. The member's not going to remember you. That comms a director will. I know I got, like, through my relationship with the scheduler, she introduced me to a friend of hers from college. They went to like an all women's college together. And that's how I got like spun into working like that summer for the White House and then for Mike Bloomberg. And it like all goes like, it all falls like dominoes in the best way possible. So just meeting the small people is hugely important.
Adding on to the adjustments, do we have any Archer fellows going in?
I think
Yes.
Adrian in the chat.
Okay, we have a couple. So you fortunately don't have the 8 people houses anymore. You are in a 4-person apartment, which is really nice. And if you look up pictures of Station House, it's really, really a nice place. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I've been inside it a few times. I have friends that lived there the past couple summers.
Yeah, it's really nice. And when we lived there, we had Amy Klobuchar living on the 5th floor, I think. So you'll see
He was my
people
neighbor.
like frequently. So don't walk around in your pajamas like I did. But that would be my biggest thing. Like Station House has some pretty nice people living there. There was another senator who walked with me to the Capitol. So just be prepared that you'll meet people at all times and like just look the part as well, because I felt really embarrassed.
Yeah, when it comes to like making the most of your time, I think, you know, people have touched on, you know, I think Kaitlyn had very wise words when it came to thinking introspectively about what you want, because there is only so much time to pursue different avenues. But at the same time, there's a lot of time to do a lot of stuff. You know, I went into, you know, Archer, and, you know, for my undergrad, before I got there, I probably averaged about 5 hours of sleep a night. And then I got there and I was like, oof, working 40 hours a week and then classes and then trying to do other stuff. Oh, it was so much easier, and there was so much time to do other stuff. So get to know your people in your office, work hard, especially if you want to turn it into a job. Like you talk about nose to the grindstone, like it, you know, there's tons of people who just are there to party and have fun. And I think that it's really easy to separate yourself from those people by actually doing good work. But then, like Colin said, making friends with the right people, and not necessarily the head honchos, but the right people. I think some of my best people were the police officers and the cafeteria workers in where I worked, and it hooked me up to do a lot of really cool stuff. Some of my coworkers that were older, I think I got to go to symphonies and plays. I got free private tours of the African American History Museum, of the portrait gallery with no one else in it, just because people in my office had connections, and they weren't necessarily these crazy people, but they just did it, and it was great to know them. Go see the arts. There's tons of music there. Obviously with COVID, everything's changing, but I'm talking as if that wasn't there. The Wharf has many music venues, concert venues, and I went to tons of concerts while I was there. You have time to travel. I went to New York, Philadelphia, Alexandria, Virginia. There's tons to do, tons of stuff, but just live it up, you know, especially if you're only there for a semester. You know, forget about those last, you know, couple hours of sleep that you wanted to get those full 7 hours, you know, whatever you're getting, you know, you only have so much time, get it all in.
I think that was some excellent advice. And I actually went on a trip for work to DC in December, and Professor Chen, she's an Archer fellow or Archer Center professor, and she gave us tickets. They were free tickets. Anybody could have gone. But it was still really great nonetheless, because I wouldn't have known about it. So I think that's a key too. There's so much free stuff to do in DC, but you just don't know about it. And so it's really just asking people who live there things to do. So I really loved your comments, Broderick. One of the questions we have in the chat is, what was the most challenging part of being an intern in DC? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? For me, I would say for me, like, I really think it's important that we talk about this as Terrys, is that a lot of people you meet in DC, like, I would say that the pay on the like in the capital and other areas is pretty low. And some people are better positioned than others to be able to take those jobs. That's just the reality of it. And I'm not going to talk about, you know, what's fair, what's equitable, but I think because of that, you're going to really have to work hard on finding what's going to work for you, reaching out to people and just being really savvy and trying to find affordable places, jobs, really finding a champion for you. Because I think that was something that was so overwhelming to me, was that I had like family obligations, and that if I really wanted to make like turning an internship into a job a reality, a lot of his jobs just didn't pay enough to live in DC and be able to support other areas of my life. And so, not to be like discouraging, but to be very mindful of that, like make a budget. I think that's important regardless of if you're moving to DC or not. But if you're moving to a more expensive area of the country, I think that's really important to have, and you need to be you need to consider those factors during your internship and beyond. I think it's easy during an internship though to be like, money doesn't matter, I'm going to make the most out of this. But if you're really thinking long term, and if you want to make it a long term like move, then you're going to have to start thinking about that early on.
Yeah, I think we're getting some really good questions. So I can answer one of them. I know that finding an internship was a really hard process for me too, not having any connections in DC, and a lot of the internships are based on networks and like people they know. The one thing I would strongly recommend is reach out to as many people, even if it's from your campus, like who have been in DC, who work in DC, who have been even interns, and reach out to them, like set up interviews or like phone calls with them and see if they can recommend you at certain places, or like if they know someone at an internship location you're interested, and that might help. Doing that got me to internships. And just so you know, like it's totally normal to not have an internship until like really late. I know I had panic attacks in November, and I called Cassie and I was like, I don't have an internship. I don't think I'm gonna be in DC, and it's okay. Just keep trying. Like someone got their internship while they, like after they came to DC. So it's like an okay process, but the only thing you can control is like networking aspect of it. And that's what I would say, like reach out, call people. Everyone wants to help. The one thing I would say about DC culture is people love talking about themselves.
As a part of that same question, I saw you, how did you find your internship you applied for? And do you have any advice for finding one for those of y'all looking? If you're through a program like Archer, they're going to be able to help you out. They have lists and stuff. But if you're not, you know, Google is a big thing. I use Google to find mine, even without the Archer Fellowship. And you can Google just, you know, DC internship programs, or you can Google like programs like Archer. They have a list of where their people go and stuff like that. So that's a good stepping stone for seeing, because you don't know what you're looking for potentially, or what opportunities are out there. So going through something like that and seeing where their people went is a great opportunity to kind of get you on a stepping stone for like, here's things that are actually possible, and also here's things I could think about to expand upon, to look for, and stuff like that. You talked about networking as a transfer student. I guess when we talk about networking, I think we're mostly talking about once we're in DC, not necessarily as a Terry networking. So I think it's once you're there, wherever you're at, is you know, it's classic. You just have to get out of your comfort zone, like Colin said, and start talking to people, start cold calling people if you want, and stuff like that.
I also think a big part about networking is just like being in as many different spaces as you can. I think like one of the big things you're going to start to see when you're there is like, I remember I lived in the tech house, which was like 5 minutes from, like 5-minute walk from the Capitol. And they have like every single bar in that area, pretty much every night of the week will have some group that's like bought it out, and they're having happy hour. So like, I remember in the little tavern we had right next to our building, the National Cattlemen's Association bought it out one night. All their lobbyists were there. If you're interested in agricultural policy or, you know, meat policy or anything like that, you show up, you go into the room, you walk in, you're getting a little name tag. They really facilitate the networking process, and they want you to meet their people, obviously. But they facilitate it. There's a lot of like guided spaces, and you just kind of have to be on the lookout for them. And also, you're kind of going to discover that like different parts of the city have a very different like politically skewed vibes. Down by like the wharf and along like the coast area is like a really like Republican heavy area. You go up towards like DuPont Circle, like up towards that area of the city, you're going to get like a lot more Dems that are hanging out there. So I mean, you definitely can like find your niche there and like network through that as well.
There's a question on what kind of things we did as interns, and I can answer that one. So one of the biggest things was going in. I went in a full suit, and literally the first thing I had to do was the Dems had just taken back the house. So everything was being brought in from the basement of the Capitol back into the office. And in my suit, I was carrying boxes, and that's a fine thing to do. That's how I started off with. And it sort of changed into more so writing like report summaries or writing reports. I did get to write a couple of hearing opening remarks for the Congresswoman, and then it sort of gets better if you prove yourself. I did get to edit parts of a bill, so you just have to keep working and just know that that coffee duty will change into something better. Did I pick up coffee cups until the end of my internships? Yes. You just have to do it, be down to earth, and do anything they ask you to do. Those are one of like some of the things I did. You won't be writing policy positions day one. It sort of comes in later. Do they train you? I didn't receive any training on like policy positions, but if you have general writing skills, then you should be more than good.
They generally
anyone else?
They generally have you focus on like regurgitating the previously stated policy stances of the member, particularly in a member's office. I mean, like their stance on gun control becomes your stance on gun control, and you do, you know, you write the constituent letter responses. Like I got to draft a few of those. That's like a really good start to getting kind of your foot in the door on that policy stuff and doing the research on that. I guess I kind of on what duties as an intern, I think we do focus a lot on like the Hill. But as you go off the Hill into like consulting spaces, even like public health spaces, like the event space and advanced space that I kind of worked in pretty heavily, you be ready to do anything. And I think that goes for everything, is that, you know, the best opportunities and the most memorable things that you're like, you know, your supervisors will see in you is that you're willing to do the outside the box stuff. I got forklift certified in an hour and was driving tanks of water and firework equipment across the Lincoln Memorial, like within a week of my internship with this event firm starting. It was wild. It was super weird. And like people remember me for being the kid that knew how to drive a forklift randomly because of stuff I did in high school. Like they remember that, and like return offers and stuff come from people remembering you.
I would say, I mean, the types of work you're going to do really varies. I think as Shruti was saying about, you know, how much trust you gain throughout the time, and also just in general, different internships. I know people on the Hill who basically, you know, almost every day were just answering phones, dealing with complaints or, you know, for the most part about their congressperson or other things. And then the coolest thing to do is like, you know, give tours of the Capitol. But I also know people who, you know, did very in-depth economic research for the White House and wrote things that were in speeches that the president gave, or you know, wrote things that the president did not read. And then I did really cool stuff that I'm sorry I brought up because I can't talk about it. But it really runs the gamut. of, you know, just grunt work, paying your dues, getting those connections while you're there, or substantive stuff. You know, and I think that going into it with a realistic point of view on maybe not being able to do all the really cool stuff that you like would love to do as an intern, you know, especially, you know, unpaid intern, that first time is good to know, but also you're going to get some gems, and you know, and it's a great experience overall.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's funny. You can't. I remember when I left my internship, I get a call because they didn't go through like the official HR, and they're like, "Wait," the general counsel was like, "Did you leave your notebooks in your desk?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was like, "Okay, good, because you can't take anything out of this office." And I was like, "Okay, don't worry, wasn't going to take anything." But yeah, one of my main projects, well, one was very more of a clerical based. And so it was like, so we have to send out these drug policy strategy consulting letters to every attorneys general, every governor, every Congress member, like everybody, including like Puerto Rico, Guam, like everyone. And so I remember I had to have like everyone signed by like the signing machine by the acting director, and then I'd have to scan it in an email. So then I'd get all these bounce backs from the staffers who quit or moved on to other roles, and then I'd have to call the office and fill in their database. So stuff like that. But I also got to go on the Hill a lot and helped prepare the acting director to testify before Congress on opioids. That was during the height of the opioid epidemic. And so stuff like that.
I also want to sorry, Shruti, just
No,
want to really quickly that if anyone wants to talk, like I can talk about my internship, just not on something that's going to be recorded online. So if anyone wants to talk to me off the record, so to speak, I'm definitely open to do that. But I worked in the federal judiciary, which is as much as I can say on here.
Going off of Broderick's point, I'll point out something. Ask your supervisor if you're allowed to tell where you intern at, because you do not want to be the intern who gets fired because they said something they were not supposed to. When you go outside, be mindful of like what you talk about. Try not, like Colin said, try not to talk about your work, as tempting as it would be. And then we had a question, were you able to take a full course load during a fall spring internship? I can't say about regular coursework. Archer, it's a breeze.
I would say fall and spring. I still have a semester left, and I was trying to find just a random intern gig, and I found one online with this like national consulting firm thing. But there are like Elizabeth Warren's office is doing like part-time internships. I saw Kamala's office is doing part-time. Like you do them part-time, 15, 20 hours a week, you fit in your full course load, do classes at night. Yeah, it's doable. If you're able to find like a full slate of online classes that you can do while you're in DC. If you're looking for something for the fall right now, like start applying to those part-time internships. They're 15 to 20 hours a week. Your classes are already online probably. And then those internships are nearly all remote and for the whole term. So you should be pretty well set up to be able to take a full slate with an internship this fall. And I guess one other thing I'd like to add out of the blue, I know we always talk about like finding a mentor, and I know we love the Therri Foundation, like they give you a mentor right off the bat and they're kind of like, here, hi, welcome. But like finding a mentor is not a marriage proposal. And I think a lot of people like confuse that, especially very early on. They're like, I need to find a mentor, and they get coffee with one person and then, will you be my mentor? Like you're supposed to have mentors in a variety of areas of your life, and the best mentors are the informal ones. I worked when I was over at the Brookings Institute. People would like come in for 10-minute meet and greets and photo ops with the president of Brookings, and then he would get an email a day later, will you be my mentor? Like, no, this guy didn't have time for you. Like, and that's the simple fact of some of these folks is that they don't have time to be your full-time mentor, but you can definitely like have a variety of mentors.
I would say that like that's a very good point, is reach out to as many people. Don't be stuck on a certain group of people. I know a lot of students like just stay with the Archer cohort, and I never did that. I networked a lot through my work, and that's why I ended up with the job offers that I did. um, there's a lot of like organizations if you work on the Hill, or I think like even if you work outside, you can join these. Like I joined the Young Asian Women in Public Health organization, and that led me to network with so many other women, and they connected me to jobs, they did informational interviews with me. So like find about these groups, like very actively ask people like, hey, is there any group you'd recommend me to join, or is there someone I should be talking to? Like you get what you put in out of the experience.
I want to talk about, I guess, when you're looking for an internship and you've got one in mind that you want to do or you want to apply for. Really, I can't emphasize enough looking into finding people that you're connected with, either first, one connection or maybe two people over that have done that. Because my internship, I didn't know, because I didn't, there were people who did it, but I didn't really talk to them before I applied. And luckily, they liked me and they gave me the job. But once I got in, I became a part of the next hiring process for the internship, and I saw the inner workings of it. And I saw, there were certain ways to make your application stand out, or certain ways that they had just a systematic way of reviewing things, that if you, it's check this box and not this box, your chances are this, dramatically higher. And it's things that, stuff like that, I'm sure all jobs have, that if you, talk to the people who are doing it before, who've seen, how the sausage is made on the other side, you have a really big help for you going into the application journey. Because it's one thing, to put all your work into a great application as you see it, but it's another thing to be able to do that and already know what they're looking for. It's a big plus. I definitely recommend everyone trying to reach out and find somebody to be like, yo, is there any tips and tricks to applying, things to put in or things to say on the interview that they're really looking for? Because things that I thought that they were looking for, they were, but they were also looking for other things I'd never thought of. And I wish it's like, I could have, pulled this, experience when I was talking to them, or highlighted this in my application.
Also, I just threw over in the chat, Tom Manatos, jobs.com, and then daybook.com are going to be your two best government DC related jobs pages. You can go search for internships, like DC internships, and you're going to kind of get given a runaround with not very well curated databases of these. But Tom Manatos, it is paid, it's $5 a month, totally worth it, especially if you're looking for an internship or job. It's really well cleaned up. The links all work. And then if you say you found it on Tom Manatos in that reference thing, it definitely, I know a lot of people who really respect that you found it from Tom Manatos, because it's a reputable site. Daybook is free, I believe, and it's a little more broad, a lot more cities, but it really focuses on that, the government, public affairs, public policy kind of spaces.
I want to be mindful that, sorry, go ahead.
Also, I threw in DCist and DC Happy Hours. DC Happy Hours is the best database of happy hours in the town. It's it will go off your location and find you what deals are closest to you. It sounds goofy, but it's super helpful. I use it all the time.
I want to be respectful of the time, but I guess we can answer this one last question in the chat, which is, was there anything you wish you did differently or regretted doing in the process of applying to and working in your internship? So for me, I would almost say I could have regretted something, and that's as an intern, and I think this matters maybe more in Congress, but for me, I applied to a White House adjacent internship when we didn't know who the president was going to be. I accepted the role, not knowing who the president was going to be. I did it because I thought that it was a really cool opportunity. I was never going to have an opportunity like it. And I think you have to maybe do some self-reflection if that is aligned with your value set. And I can't tell you if it is or not, but for me, it was worth it regardless, even because, look, you're not a political appointee. You're going there as an intern. I don't think anybody's going to necessarily judge you and on your resume and assume that you are affiliated in any type of way. It might be different if you're actually in the White House or in a certain congressional member's office, and it is nuanced. But I would say that I wouldn't off the bat count something out because it's across the aisle from how you normally align yourself. And my fellow panelists might have other opinions, but that's just mine, having interned at a White House adjacent agency.
I would say that anything that you put on your resume, if it's for, let's say you're a Dem and you don't really want to work for a Republican, you're through like Archer or one of your college-based programs and they put you in a Republican office. My resume was with a Republican. I tend to work for Dems, although I work for both sides of the aisle. So mine just says United States Congressional Office, intern. You don't have to put your member's name, always refer to them by the member. That's kind of a way of like sneaking by. If you go to an interview and they ask you who it was, tell them, especially if you're going over Dem side, like if you're coming from a Republican office, tell them, yeah, it wasn't exactly who I wanted to work for. They'll totally get it. And another thing I think really important, kind of similar to what Kaitlyn was saying, is that especially if you're in administration, like Kaitlyn, what office were you in again?
I was the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. So if I want to get around to your point, I just say Office of National Drug Control Policy. Nobody really looks into it.
Yeah, no, and along that point as well is like the work you're doing is a service, and the work you're doing is like helping people, and ultimately finding the good in the work that you're doing, regardless of the partisan lines, is so important. I tend to align with Dems, and I worked the Salute to America for Donald Trump. It was that huge event he did on the National Mall with a grotesque overspending and a, you know, blatant showing of national military force. But I did it. I mean, I rolled the tanks into place. I backed them up. And like at that moment, I like wondered, like, and is what I'm doing right? Like, is what I'm doing okay? And the thing that I've realized working both sides of the aisle with that was like, I am assisting in the process of free speech in our country and giving these people a platform. And ultimately it's business and it's free speech. I turned down a White House Easter egg roll job, and I turned down the second Salute to America job because I just couldn't stomach it politically now, because I knew what it was and I knew kind of the direction it was going, and I didn't really want to align myself with that. But your first time and your first internship doesn't, like, it matters, but like nobody's going to judge you for it.
The one thing I would say is like, I regret, so you'll get multiple internship offers because I know everyone here is really smart. If you're declining an offer, and I wish I had done this, see if they can do like a coffee with you, or you can still meet them so you can have them as a network and you can still have a good connection. So if you need a job later on at their office, they don't remember as you as the intern who declined their offer, but as someone who like actively reached out.
People never forget. Like, don't stiff the people you leave.
I guess the only thing I'd really add is, I think it goes, I mean, I keep going back to what Kaitlyn said about thinking introspectively about what you want out of your time there. Because if you were looking at, potentially, getting a job offer or just being able to rely on that network in the future, then it's going to be really different than thinking about, oh, I just want this great experience to have and then go forward and do something else. And I knew I was going to go to law school, and I was, thinking about everything. And I was like, well, I'm not going to turn this into a job. And that my internship didn't even offer that in general as an opportunity. But that I had that different mindset. But I really regret not putting a lot more time into the job. I put a lot of time. I skipped class sometimes to stay after and do stuff for the job. But I definitely wish I could have put a little more into it. And you'll see the spectrum of that with other coworkers. Some of them are grinding. I knew someone who's working 2 jobs. So I'm trying to get something out of this. But knowing what you want out of it, and so you can act accordingly. Because I definitely would have worked, spent a lot of my out of work hours time doing stuff. Looking back.
I don't know if there are any last comments or questions, but I know we went over about 15 minutes. Thank you guys for your time. I hate to be the one to end it, but it's been really great rehashing fun times in DC.
Thanks for coming, guys.
And I always have trouble like copying links in the chat, so you might have to like write down or retype things we posted in the chat, just FYI. I don't know if anybody's still on.
We can send our information to Amber too if someone needs it, and she can connect you with us.
Yes, definitely.